the Subcommittee on Procurement and ask for a roll to be taken. Clerk, can you please have electronic? Morris? All right, we have a forum. Today we all have we have a special presentation on procurement because we need to play your mic closer.
Just take out one of the people said they couldn't hear you. Move your mic closer.
Is this better? Right. Okay. Thank you. Keep me posted. Today we're going to lead off the committee with a presentation by Mr. Curtis G. Manchester, who's Senior Assistant of Attorney General, and he's going to talk to us about procurement, which we've had a lot of questions about, and a lot of people say that they're interested in learning about this subject. Mr. Manchester.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of this subcommittee. I'm Curtis Manchester. I'm in the Transportation and Construction section at the Office of the Attorney General, where I've been for about 6 years. One of my pleasures of service is helping entities to procure, contract for, and see projects through to the finish line. For example, the building that we're in was one of the projects that I have assisted with bringing to conclusion. I hope you're all enjoying it. I've been asked to present a general overview of Virginia procurement laws. This will just be a general overview, and primarily focused on state agencies, but other entities as well. I plan to keep this presentation to about 15 minutes. And there may be more information in the slides than I cover. I'm not here to speak on or behalf of a particular bill or against any particular bill. In fact, please know these materials are mine, and they're not to be construed as some sort of opinion by the Attorney General.
Spoken like a lawyer, right?
So with that, we'll get started, and I'm going to move pretty quickly again to try and keep it to 15 minutes. Slide presentation will be as you see it: procurement law generally, oversight and authority, the Virginia Public Procurement Act, which is the main governing code section for our procurement. There are methods under the VPPA that need to be described, at least in general terms. I'll touch on some specific types of contracts, job order contracts, design build, construction manager at risk, some of which I think bills are pending before this committee. There's certainly other procurement laws and authorities I'll touch on, and finally to EVA, which is the Central Computer Web-Based System administered by Department of General Services, for posting solicitations, notices of award, and things like that. So I understand some of you may have little experience with regard to procurement, so what are we talking about? We're talking about government's procurement of goods, services, works from non-governmental services. And it is very wide in breadth, from IT services, construction, office, pencils, and supplies. So most procurements are subject to our Virginia Public Procurement Act, and the Code of Virginia authorizes 2 agencies primarily to create procurement policies and procedures, and to procure on behalf of the Commonwealth entities, at least. That's our Department of General Services, General Goods and Services, and Virginia Information Technology Agency, VITA, which is for IT-related goods and services. I also want to point out that our Department of Small Business and Supplier Diversity, that department is tasked with evaluating and certifying certain types of businesses, small business, women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, so that they may participate in certain programs that the state or local governments wish to provide opportunities to them. And sometimes it's only to those certified businesses that certain procurements are designed. They also run and certify disadvantaged business entities, which is the federal United States Department of Transportation term for these types of businesses, and every state has to have a program. So they do double duty, and that helps VDOT out to make sure it is providing certain opportunities and getting federal funding that requires such opportunities. Other sources, at least with regard to state entities, there are other procurement laws than the VPPA. And then there's the Appropriation Acts. And I want to point out that the Appropriation Acts are like super law. They control over all other existing law. So if the General Assembly decides we want 27 buildings built for this particular purpose and we want it done in a year, and we're going to waive the requirements of the VPPA and state agency go do it, the General Assembly can do that. They can override any of our laws. Governor's executive orders come into place. Sometimes one of the primary ones is EO 20, which directs entities that are procuring, not only executive entities, but other entities, to exceed a target goal of 42% participation by small businesses in their discretionary spending. For capital outlay projects, it's a little higher goal, but executive orders will come into play in some circumstances. Secretary of Administration is also given the authority to issue procedures with regard to certain matters, including procurement of construction management at risk contracts. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So generally, I included the provision at 2.21111, all purchases by Commonwealth entities are to be made in accordance with VPPA. Those purchases are referring to general goods and services, but there's a threshold direction to do so. The exceptions for entities who are not covered by VPPA processes are either in the enabling legislation for that body, or they're set forth in Article 3 of the VPPA. I've provided some exclusions, certain institutions of higher education, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Local government entities, your county, city, town, certain boards, if they have adopted ordinances for procurement procedures which are consistent with VPPA, then they can follow those. And last DGS looked at it, it's about 50% of the localities have, but most of them adopt ordinances that mirror the VPPA. School divisions as well can, and there's certain named entities in Article 3. But I will say that anyone who's exempted generally has to adopt procedures consistent with VPPA, so you get back into the same concepts. Let me tell you just a little bit of quick history about the VPPA, because I want to emphasize that the Act as a whole was very carefully studied and put together. In 1983, it was passed. The General Assembly created a task force to review all public procurement by all bodies to create a more uniform structure, because at the time, there was all different structures. Agencies were doing things differently. It was very much one-off procedures. And they said that's not good for the public. So they created a task force with all of the stakeholders. So state agencies, localities, higher ed, suppliers, general contractors, subcontractors, bonding companies, federal government entities, and they had a 2-year study to come up with a new act to be the governing statutory body for procurement for most things in Virginia. I will say that the task force did not recommend adopting either the American Bar Association Model Procurement Code, which still goes on today. Some states have adopted that. Virginia is not a Model Act state, nor did Virginia adopt the Federal Acquisition Regulation, which is how the federal government and all federal agencies go about procuring what they need through contracting officers, et cetera. So we are not one of those states, and sometimes our participants forget and they send us things that are on a federal template, and we have to send them back and say that that's not how we do things. The next thing is probably the most important, and the task force found this, put it in its report. We need to keep in mind that the primary purpose for public procurement is the benefit of the public. There are all kinds of procedures about openness and fairness of competition, et cetera, but the overriding purpose is to benefit the public, and the laws are designed to guide the bodies to get what they need. But as you're looking at bills, I suggest you keep that primary purpose in mind. Here's one section of the Public Procurement Act policies that are intended by the Act. The very top bullet, to obtain high-quality goods and services at reasonable cost. You notice it's not to obtain any goods and services. It's high-quality goods and services. And it's not at the lowest cost. It's at a reasonable cost. Of course, to provide fair and impartial procedures, all qualified vendors have access, competition to be sought to the maximum feasible degree. And the report made a comment on this competition goal, and it said it's important to keep in mind that the competition is not to benefit the competitors who may win a job. It's so that theoretically the government has the best options for procuring what it needs. Either what's being provided or price. So it's intended to meet that first goal of high quality goods and service at a reasonable cost. Okay, I'm going to quickly run through the most common types of procurement because it's important to understand how things are being procured. First one is what most people are familiar with, which is competitive sealed bidding, using an invitation for a bid. That's when the entity knows what it wants, specifies what it wants, and price is typically the controlling factor. And the entity will issue an invitation for bids, publicly post that, and receive sealed bids. Now, for example, in construction, which I focus on, the invitation for bid will have the plans, it'll have the specifications, it'll have the contract documents someone's going to sign, it's going to have a bid form, it's going to have anything else that the bidder needs to know to make a bid for the project. The bids will be received. They are sealed, they're publicly opened, and the procurement officer will announce them, announce the amount, and the contract will be awarded to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. Responsive, meaning what was asked for, did they respond to that correctly? Responsible, are they licensed? Can they provide a bond if needed? Those types of issues. Nowhere in that process does the bidder disclose whether it's going to subcontract any portion of the work, who they may use, what their project team may be. It's just, here's what we want and here's the price. Afterward, that general contractor can subcontract, not subcontract. They can do it all themselves. They can provide whatever management team they want, switch it whenever they want. You only have coordination after the bid. The second process, competitive negotiation and request for proposals. Quickly, most people think competitive sealed bidding is the competition needed for the Procurement Act, but competitive negotiation is another way which is competitive and results in good value to the Commonwealth. That's when the entity, Commonwealth entities or whomever, they know what they'd like to have, but in general terms, but they don't have specifics. They haven't made plans to give to a bidder. They want proposals from entities to say, what would your plan be? How would you approach it? In that process, you have a request for proposals. You provide them basic information about what you're looking for. Maybe it's timing, needs to be done by a certain time. You tell them what factors the body will consider important and how they will be scored. The proposals come in, and the body will evaluate the proposals. And then after that, they will negotiate with the higher ranking proposals to see if they can get to a final price. Small purchases, code allows up to $200,000 right now, where you don't have to use an RFP or IFB, but competition is to be had where preferable. And for example, DGS will say for purchases under $50,000, we want you to get 1 or 2 quotes. But there is a small purchase provision that does not require competition. Other items, sole source, that's when there may be only one product or service provider that's practically available for what is needed. That's very rare. Body has to make that determination and post it on EVA if they think they're only going to procure from one source. Emergency procurement, that can happen in a number of instances, but think of a tornado comes through and destroys property and you need to repair or extra property or something quickly. And so you're not going to take the time to go through a typical procurement process. Last, joint cooperative procurement. The state entities are permitted to tag team with other entities to collectively procure goods and services. And they're also permitted to procure with federal entities. All right, job order contracts. I think there's a bill before the committee or coming up on job order contracts. What's that? That's where you procure one contract, and over time you can issue multiple job orders. There need to be similar types of jobs. Maybe you're have a progression of changing locks at a bunch of buildings on your campus. Maybe you have a need for special event, janitorial, whatever it is. They need to be similar jobs, and you have the discretion over time to issue those job orders. Right now, the maximum is $500,000 per job, $6 million total over the life of the contract. It's a 1-year term limitation with 2 additional years, and that contract terminates the earlier of you use your money or the time expires. Design, build, and construction management manager contracts, separate chapter in the code for these types of contracts. Design build is where you're hiring a designer and builder together. You're not separately hiring a designer, architect, and your builder separately. You're hiring it under the same contract. Generally, it's a project that you give certain parameters to, and they will design and build it. I want to renovate 2 dorms in the existing spot. I want food service under one. I want laundry in both. You need to design it per our existing requirements for student dorms, and that is a proposal process. Construction management at risk is probably the most complicated procurement that we have. Utilized for complex projects. That's when the owner engages the architect engineer to design, and then the owner engages, while the design is happening, a construction manager through a negotiation process, and that construction manager provides pre-construction services as well as proceeds to construct the facility if price can be agreed when the design is finally finished. What's a complex project? These are some of the items that entities can point to say this is a complex project. You know, certain site locations may have high water tables, a lot of rock, or out on a precipice. You may have an accelerated schedule. These need to be done quickly. Historic projects have their own planning and requirements. So a construction management contract, keep in mind, is different than a general contractor contract. Construction management is when the agency is hiring this entity to coordinate and administer construction services for its benefit. And the code says the construction manager cannot perform more than 10% of the value of construction work and must subcontract out 90%. I've put on this slide a big exception that was passed last year, 2023 General Assembly, for local bodies, when language was added that subcontracting requirement is not required for local body contracts involving infrastructure projects. What's the problem with that? Well, neither involving nor infrastructure was defined anywhere, and it essentially swallows the rule for subcontracting for a lot of entities, because entities use the word infrastructure so generically for almost anything they say they're building. Anyhow, I point that out to the committee. It's there. I don't think it's a subject of bills this year, but since you are the procurement committee, that is an exception to the subcontract. The body can require certain value be performed by small business entities in accordance with EO 20 or otherwise, and construction management requires the two-step competitive negotiation process. Back.
Tell us how many more slides you have, just because we have some people that need to get to a meeting at 4
Sure.
and so forth.
Sure, I'm going to run through this pretty quickly. I've got about 5.
All right, thank you. If we can move along, that would be great. Thank you.
So construction management, pre-construction services are for cost estimating, helping with the planning, helping with the approach, constructability issues. Again, trying to get this project to be within budget. Then if they agree that on a price for the CM to proceed in the construction phase, it will, and it's at risk to then complete the scope on time and within the guaranteed maximum price. And if it costs less than that, the money's come back to the Commonwealth. I'm going to skip ahead on complying with procedures, but generally they are DGS procedures and Secretary of Administration procedures. Current Secretary of Administration procedures require evaluation of the offeror's experience for the past 10 years of programs and projects of similar type as part of the process. I'm going to skip through this. I will just say DGS reviews proposed procedures and comments on state and covered institutions, not for others. The Restructured Higher Education Act gives procurement autonomy in different degrees to different tiered institutions according to the rules set forth in their specific management agreement or memorandum of understanding. There's also the Public-Private Education Facilities Infrastructure Act, which has gotten some more attention lately. The idea there is some public entities can come in, partner with an entity, build something, and get the project done faster, usually with its investment as well. And the PPTA, Public-Private Transportation Act, again, contracting with private entities, typically to build facilities and be able to expand more quickly. Think of toll roads here. That's a perfect example of a partnership. EVA, I mentioned. Almost all these procedures require people to post solicitations and their contract awards and decisions on EVA. The idea being that everybody, general contractors, suppliers, et cetera, can know what public bodies are doing, perhaps bid, perhaps not. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Manchester. Any questions from the members of the... Thank you so much for taking time to come here. And will your slide deck be available for us online? You have it?
Yes, I understand it's online as well. And I'd also point the committee for further reading if desired. There is a report on the reports published by the Public Body Procurement Work Group on Construction Management at Risk. And within that report, there's a small report of mine included, which just focuses on CM at risk. And you don't have to read 300-some pages of the rest of the report. So
thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Time to come here this morning. Thank you.
There's a link on the agenda, you can tell me.
There is also a link on the agenda for folks if you want to look at that later. That's available. Elizabeth Bennett Parker is not here.
She's right here.
Yeah, right. Come ahead. I'd like to hear yours because I know you have got to get to another committee meeting to run.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two bills before you. The first is House Bill 894.
Yes.
Thank
Tell
you,
us
Madam.
about your bill and why we need it.
This bill makes 3 changes to current law. First, it clarifies that during a video meeting of a public body, a member must be on camera and have functional audio. A member may still turn off their camera to eat or use the restroom, but that would be equivalent to leaving the room during an in-person meeting. This will prevent virtual meetings from being a bunch of black screens. Second, it requires a body to vote on their virtual meeting policy at least annually rather than just once to ensure that public feedback is always part of the process. And third, it expands the flexibility for advisory bodies made up of volunteers and regional bodies to hold all virtual meetings from a cap of 25% to a cap of 50% while retaining significant guardrails to ensure public access and transparency. The bill does not expand flexibility or apply to local elected bodies or the General Assembly, planning commissions, or other bodies that are currently prohibited from holding all virtual meetings. The bill is permissive and not mandatory. No one has to hold virtual meetings, and localities can place additional restrictions beyond the state rules for their advisory bodies. This brings parity to the treatment of boards and commissions. Currently, those that meet 4 times per year are able to hold 50% of their meetings virtually. This would treat those who hold more than that the same. Bodies are still prohibited from holding consecutive all virtual meetings. The current restrictions create barriers to service. Older adults, people with disabilities, members of the military, parents with childcare responsibilities, business executives, and others whose schedules may not always allow attendance or who may face other barriers are affected. We have more than a year's worth of experience that the changes previously made to allow limited all virtual meetings do not provide enough flexibility to meet the variety of needs of appointed boards and commissions and our constituents who wish to serve. We've seen meetings get canceled and the public's business get postponed due to lack of in-person quorum. I've heard about this issues from residents across the Commonwealth. Increased flexibility is a top priority of the statewide Council on Aging. This bill is supported by the AARP. I've heard a lot from parents who are unable to participate on, say, school board advisory committees as one example. The bill is supported by members of the public who are represented by a wide array of groups from the Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the Northern Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the League of Women Voters, the ARC, the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, the Virginia Conservation Network, the AUW, Virginia Grassroots, VML, VACO, and more, and I believe a number of those folks are here to speak today.
Thank you. First, do we have any questions from members of the committee? Any comments? All right, we have a number of folks online, which we'll go to, and also we'll have folks in the audience who speak in favor or oppose. So we'll start with in favor first, and because we have a number of folks, I'm going to ask if we can set those up if you can set the timer at 2 minutes per testimony. And in addition, if you are saying, I'm asking folks, if you are coming up to say, you want to repeat the same thing that somebody else said, if you can just say, I agree, or I'm also in favor of this bill, then that will facilitate our process. All right, first, anyone else here in the audience who would like to speak in favor of 894?
Hello, my name is April Breslaw. I live in Alexandria, Virginia, and I'm a member of the Alexandria Human Rights Commission. I'm here today to ask you to vote yes for HB 894 and expand the use of virtual meetings by advisory bodies. Even before COVID, most states allowed virtual meetings without the restrictions that we have in Virginia. And virtual meetings have been very successful, especially for bodies like the Alexandria Human Rights Commission. They increase attendance, transparency, and public participation in government. They also help address barriers to in-person participation, including professional obligations, childcare, and the cost of transportation. HB 894 proposes common sense adjustments to the rules that govern meetings of advisory bodies. And so I ask you to please support this bill so that Virginia can benefit from modern technology and develop more representative public policy. So thank you for supporting the bill.
Next.
Good afternoon, Michelle Gowdy from the Virginia Municipal League. I'm also speaking for the Virginia Association of Counties. We've worked well with the delegate. We thank her for bringing the bill and we support it.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. Sarah Taylor with the City of Alexandria on behalf of the city as well as Arlington County, who was unable to be here. We support the bill.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Michael Schuster. I represent ARP Virginia, which enthusiastically supports this bill. And I'm also the chair of the Alexandria City Commission on Aging. So I have a lot of personal experience in trying to deal with in-person meetings. Most of our commission members are elderly, and some of them have caregiver responsibilities, and some have health issues. Just yesterday, a member of our local commission on aging could not attend a commission meeting because she is her mother's sole caregiver, who is terminally ill, and her sitter canceled at the last moment. She also has a full-time job and takes her mother to medical appointments. She may have been able to attend this commission meeting if she could have attended remotely. Therefore, for these reasons, we support this legislation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Martina James on behalf of the Virginia Association of Area Agencies on Aging. On behalf of older adults and caregivers across the state, we support this. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, David Blunt on behalf of the Virginia Association of Planning District Commissions as well as the Thomas Jefferson Planning District. We support the bill.
Thank you. And I believe we have some folks online who would like to testify. Do we have Michelle McKinney?
Yes.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Ms. McKinney.
Okay, good afternoon. I live in rural Rappahannock County. My county has a population of 6,218. While we are low on population, we are rich in land and agritourism. I love my county. There are so many wonderful things to love, but there are real everyday challenges to living in a rural area. The closest grocery store to me is 20 minutes away. The nearest hospital is an hour. And if I wasn't able to work remotely and drive, I would spend 3 hours a day driving. The long distances rural folks travel from point A to point B prevents real challenges and barriers for us to participate in. Zoom remote video conferences, these are godsends to us. This bill would help ensure that my zip code doesn't limit my ability to participate fully in civic life. Please consider the passage of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. We have April Breslaw, Mr. Bob Effort, Connor Cummings, Sharon Cummings. All right, anyone else that I'm missing on the link there? All right, thank you. Let's hear, we have any opposition to the bill?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, Megan Ryan with the Virginia Coalition for Open Government. Every year, as the director of the coalition, I receive hundreds of calls and emails from citizens across the country, across the state, and from Virginia reporters asking questions about FOIA, and about a third of those are about meetings. They ask about public bodies meeting in groups of 2 by 2 to get around FOIA. Public bodies going into closed session on questionable grounds, public bodies voting in secret, voting in closed session, or saying they don't have to vote at all. Public bodies not giving notice of their meetings, and public bodies refusing to accept written comments or barring people from speaking at meetings, 2 meetings in a row. These are the issues that your constituents are facing. They are not calling me, clamoring for more meetings to be held electronically. Yes, they would like to participate in electronically, but they are not asking for their members to be able to participate more electronically. These bills are being promoted by members of the public bodies to make it more convenient for them to participate. This past spring, when the Virginia Supreme Court unanimously upheld the right of the public to be physically present in the room where a meeting was taking place, that case is City of Suffolk School Board versus Wallstrom. The judges also specifically mentioned that by creating the current framework for when virtual meetings are allowed, that, quote, the General Assembly has recognized that there are key differences between in-person meetings and virtual meetings. Keep in mind that all of these individuals on these bodies may participate remotely in various situations. They can participate remotely, call into a meeting if they have a personal emergency, if they have a caregiver situation, if they are disabled, if they have a temporary disability. All these are already written into law. They can call in individually to those meetings. What this bill is seeking to do is to say, though, every member of the public body can now participate remotely and thereby force all the public to participate remotely as well, even those who would prefer to be in person. And here's where I would like to note that many school districts are eliminating virtual snow days. And when the Fairfax County School District removed their virtual snow days, they did so to maximize in-person learning and to ensure equitable access to instruction and student services for all students.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see the timer. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Catherine Ford with the Virginia Press Association. I would like to respectfully oppose this bill and associate ourselves with the comments previously and note that public spaces with public officials present is a critical space for journalists and the press to reach their public officials and interrogate them about their activities and be present where public business is being conducted. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience? Comments for or against? How about committee members? Any comments, questions?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess one quick question. It seems like the biggest difference here, most of this is cleanup. You're adding some procedural, I would say hurdles, but some safeguards, right, to make sure the public bodies are doing this and reviewing their policies on a regular basis. The biggest change seems to be that we can do it more often now, right? We're going from 25 to 50%. Is it true that that if you guys do it all virtual, literally no one can show up in person? Is that, I mean, or does it mean that if you get less than a quorum, it's considered an all virtual meeting? I don't mean to ask a stumper. I'm just, as I'm reading the bill, I'm wondering, so if you get to, less than a quorum, can you say, well, I'm going to use this as one of my 50% quote unquote all virtual, even if maybe some number of the members are sitting in a room together?
Madam Chair, to the delegate, I would say, right now, if you know in advance that you are not going to have a quorum present, then you could, if you were one of the bodies able to hold an all-virtual meeting and you had the numerical ability to do so within the confines of the current law, you could notice the meeting as a virtual meeting. Everything else has to apply in terms of FOIA and how that meeting is noticed. And we put a number of guardrails in place when we first passed this policy in terms of making sure that if the feed goes down and the public can't see it, it has to stop. There has to be a phone number where someone can call. There's a number of guardrails in place. But I think the most important clarification that I would make to the delegate is that this bill does not apply to local elected bodies. It does not apply to school boards. It does not apply to the General Assembly. It does not apply to planning commissions, boards of architectural review, boards of zoning appeals, and all of the numerous bodies that are not allowed to hold virtual meetings. This only slightly expands that flexibility for those bodies that are already able to do so.
Yeah, it's already pretty narrowed, is what I'm hearing. Thank you.
Delegate McClure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question of the patron. A witness just mentioned that folks could still participate virtually and call in, but to the patron, does that count toward the quorum if they are participating virtually and calling in?
Madam Chair, could the delegate repeat her question?
Yes, Madam Chair. There was a witness that mentioned folks could still call in virtually to these meetings, but I was just wondering if that counts toward the quorum if they appear virtually.
Madam Chair, to the delegate, I would say that this bill primarily has to do with all virtual meetings, and so I think everyone would be online. I think getting back to the previous delegate question, we're getting into sort of hybrid meetings, which is generally the use of individual remote participation. And in order for that to happen, then there has to be a quorum in the room.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Anything else? Delegate, do you have any other statements you'd like to make to finish up?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just say that I believe you have all received an organizational support letter and reiterate that the bill is supported by the League of Women Voters, the Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the AARP, the AUW, the ARC, the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, Virginia Grassroots, the Virginia Conservation Network, the Northern Virginia Aging Network, VACO, the Virginia Association of Planning District Commissions, VML, and the Northern Virginia Chamber of Commerce.
Move to report. Second.
Can we please go to the electronic voting board? The bill passes 7-0. Delegate, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have one more bill.
All right.
This is House Bill 1040. This bill is a recommendation of both the FOIA Council and the Disability Commission. It would allow a member of a public body who is a person with a disability or a caregiver of a person with a disability to count towards quorum when participating remotely in accordance with the restrictions of the law. It also clarifies that individuals participating remotely in accordance with those restrictions are allowed to vote. Currently, and we were getting into this on the last bill, in order for any person to participate remotely in an in-person meeting, there must be an in-person quorum. The body must have adopted an electronic participation policy in addition to other guardrails and restrictions. Many advisory boards and commissions are having challenges reaching an in-person quorum, and this is particularly affecting disability boards and silencing the voices of the disability community. Disability boards have had to cancel their meetings due to a lack of quorum. We're hearing that members with disabilities and their caregivers feel they should resign from their boards because they are contributing to the inability to achieve a physical quorum. The bill includes caregivers because though many people with disabilities can speak for themselves, there is a large part of the disability community that rely on parents and caregivers to share their stories, needs, and voices. The experiences of caregivers and their participation on our bodies is valuable, and we must recognize that caregivers face many barriers to in-person participation, which include a lack of other caregivers to help and more. People with disabilities and family members actively caring for someone with a disability are already legally allowed to participate remotely if certain conditions are met. This does not change that. It allows them to count towards quorum so the public's business can be conducted. I believe there are folks online to speak to the bill.
Is there anyone here in the audience who wants to speak in favor of this bill? And again, we hold everything to 2 minutes, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. Ashley Wright here on behalf of the ARC of Virginia. We're very grateful to Delegate Bennett Parker for bringing this forward. We wholeheartedly support this bill. I think she did a fantastic job explaining the reasons why. I will point out that especially now while we're going through a provider shortage, a lot of caregivers are especially struggling to find somebody who can care for their loved one in order for them to travel in some cases to make these meetings and participate. So participation in this matter would really open up a lot of opportunities for those caregivers to participate in the process. So thank you. We ask you to support the bill.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Michael Schuster again for AARP Virginia. We support this bill, and I just referred to my comments I made earlier. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have some folks. Oh, sorry, one more.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Sarah Taylor, City of Alexandria, on behalf of the city as well as Arlington County, who was able to be here. We support the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. We have several folks online. If we can tune them in. First, Lucy Beednell.
Good afternoon. I'm Lucy Beednell, speaking on behalf of the ARC of Northern Virginia and as a parent of a kid with disabilities. I will say things like virtual access are a core need and a core accommodation for the disability community. As Delegate Bennett Parker clarified, FOIA has already agreed that people with disabilities and their caregivers can participate virtually if they need to, but without those folks being able to count toward the quorum and vote consistently, we're seeing in Northern Virginia, local committees are grinding to a halt. We're having meetings where people were told they could participate virtually because of a disability accommodation and someone is sick at the last minute and people are told that they then must drive to the room. Committee meetings are being canceled and committee meetings are being delayed as people drive from their home to the physical space where the meeting is being held while scrambling for caregiving. It's a wreck and we would really like to be able to function. I will say we've had several members of committees quit or refuse to be appointed or reinstated because without virtual access, it's not realistic for them to participate and they don't want to hold the committee down by not being able to count towards the quorum or vote. And I will say as a parent of a kid with disabilities who's had more head stitches than you can shake a stick at and who spent a lot of September in the hospital with him, this is the only way I can get things done. I have 20 years of experience in the disability committee field, which I am happy to volunteer on boards and committees, but can only do when I am able to do so virtually. In the last year, I lost only 3 family backup caregivers I had to cancer, ALS, and addiction. So thank you so much for your accommodations and support.
Thank you very much. And if the clerk can let us know so we can hear when the 2 minutes is up. Thank you. Then we have Mr. Bob Eford. And how about Teresa Champion? Connor Cummings, Sharon Cummings? We can't hear the Cummings. Please unmute. Well, let it be noted that these folks all wanted to speak in favor of the bill. Lucy Beedwell, Mr. Bob Eford, Teresa Champion, Connor, and Sharon Cummings. Thank you very much. All right, any comments from the committee members?
Go against.
Oh, one more. In opposition?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Megan Ryan, Coalition for Open Government. I just did want to point out a few things. One, we just witnessed one of the problems with all virtual meetings is loss of audio and unfortunate situations. And when combined, I wanted to point out that when combined with the bill that you just passed, 864, we have actually created a hybrid meeting, as Delegate McClure had asked about earlier. In 2022, we said we were going to have all virtual or we're going to have in-person. I mean, we're going to have individual participation with a quorum present. Now we are creating hybrid meetings. Just to be clear, in the FOIA Council, we did support the addition of those with disabilities, letting them count to the quorum. The provision about caregivers was added at the last minute, and we feel that it is easily abused and easily taken advantage of to chip away at that in-person quorum, and then the public is left with no place to go. Finally, we would say that if boards and commissions are having a hard time getting new members and or making a quorum, that we should incentivize the service, and those localities should do what they can to make sure that they are recruiting members and that they are making it easy for them to serve. We should not be tinkering with the rules of FOIA, which apply to state agencies, regional public bodies, as well as all other kinds of, and this section applies to all public bodies, including city councils and boards of supervisors. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other voices in opposition? All right, any other statements from committee members?
Madam Chair, I would just say, what I find ironic about this one, we have a board for people with disabilities that requires a certain number of members be affected directly by disabilities, whether they be disabled people or caregivers and so forth. And I think that's one of the boards that's really struggled to meet their quorum. And so we require, it's not like just one or two people. We actually require that a majority of these people be people with disabilities or caregivers, and but then require them all to show up in person. So with that, I would move that the bill report.
Is there a second? Second. Committee members, please indicate their preference on the electronic board. Congratulations, Delegate. Your bill reports 7-0.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. You need to be in the. I have one piece of business. Delegate Freitas has asked that his bill 671 be stricken from the docket.
So moved.
Second. Voice.
That's a recorded vote.
Excited.
Right.
Sure.
And then
We need to vote.
Open the roll.
open the roll, please. All right, that vote passes 6-0. So 671 will be stricken from the docket. Delegate Arnold is here.
Afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee.
Thank you, Delegate Arnold. Let's hear about your bill and why we need it.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. HB 428 is a bill that authorizes the Department of Conservation and Recreation to quitclaim and release certain property rights related to a communal well that they acquired in Wythe County during the development of the New River Trail State Park. Representatives from DCR are here to explain any details about this to the committee.
Thank you. Let's hear. Mr. Wells.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Matt Wells, I'm the Director of the Department of Conservation and Recreation. We are the parent agency of our 42 wonderful state parks. Delegate explained the bill. We need General Assembly approval to quitclaim the easement on these wells. Appreciate them bringing the bill. We support it. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from members of the committee? Anybody in the audience who'd like to speak in favor of this bill? Anyone in opposition? Committee moves by motion.
Move to report.
Second. Can we please have a vote recorded on the electronic board? Delegate Arnold, your bill passes 5-0. Thank you very much for bringing this.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee.
Want to go ahead and do yours? Sure. Understand that Delegate Carlson has a similar bill. She's not able to get back here from the committee where she is presenting, so she has asked Delegate Simon to present for her.
So, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, this is a very similar bill to the one we just heard. The Commonwealth of Virginia is the beneficiary of an easement in Albemarle County that allowed folks to cross the Biscuit Run property, but the Commonwealth has no interest in that anymore. Property's been turned into a park, and they don't need that ingress and egress across the Biscuit Run anymore. And so because the Commonwealth is the beneficiary of the easement, the way we give it back is the General Assembly has to pass legislation in Section 1 that says we authorize giving it back. And so that's what this bill does. And I think we have somebody here from DCR that wants to speak to this
Mr.
one
Wells.
as well.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Matt Wells, DCR Director. Delegate Simon did a really good job describing the bill. We appreciate the delegate bringing it and the other delegate for carrying it forward. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from committee members? Anyone in the audience speak in favor? Anyone in the audience to speak in opposition? I have a note that if we pass this, we need to refer it then to Committee on Courts. All right, committee moves by motion.
Move to report and refer to courts.
Okay. Second. All right. Would you please have that vote recorded on the electronic meeting? All right, thank you. Delegate Carlson and absentia. Bill passes 7-0. All right, who do we have here now? Delegate Early, I know was here earlier. Is he here? Delegate Early? Delegate Walker? Committee will be at ease. Delegate Early, we have your bill HB 873. Tell us about this and why we need it.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I appreciate you having me today. This is House Bill 873. Very simple bill, in my opinion, that basically just adds to the privacy protection for homeschooled children and homeschooling families. Currently, in this code section I'm seeking to amend, there are already 54 topics of discussion which public bodies may, and I want to emphasize that it's permissive, it's may hold closed meetings for. And this bill just proposes one additional topic to that, essentially a closed meeting discussion by a local school board or the Virginia Department of Education concerning information related to the home instruction of minor children or the discussion of parents' religious convictions related to that child's education. So essentially it's addressing the need for privacy and sensitivity in these kind of conversations. acknowledges that these kind of things involve personal and private matters. Without the exemption, discussions about homeschooling or the minors, including personal identification, addresses, information on required forms, that sort of thing, are subject to public disclosure under FOIA. So that's what this is seeking to change. By adding the exemption from the open meeting requirements, the legislation aims to protect the privacy of parents and guardians, recognizing their autonomy in this, and the exemption is, again, compliant or contingent on the compliance with relevant laws, ensuring that any confidential information discussed aligns with existing legal frameworks. The law already protects the discussion in a public meeting of information related to public school students and those in higher education. So this is just an extension of that same privacy to homeschool students. In the same way of that other information, if parents or students sincerely held religious beliefs, either written or personally expressed to school board members, I don't believe should be open to public scrutiny unless that parent would like them to be, which it says specifically here they can object and have it in an open meeting if they would like. There's no fiscal impact on this, so I appreciate the committee's time and would ask the committee to consider it favorably. And I do think there's a few folks here to speak on it.
Thank you. I have a question from Delegate Cole.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would pose a question to the delegate. It was interesting enough, on my way down to the committee, we received a phone call from a constituent who's homeschooled who was against the bill. But when we asked the question of how it would be utilized, they weren't aware of how it would be utilized as well. So I would just ask the patron if he would be willing to explain or give an example of a meeting when this would be utilized.
Thank you. Delegate Early?
And I think somebody who's going to speak to this will go into that a little bit more. But I think basically, a homeschooling family submits information to the board, and the question is whether it's going to be discussed sort of out here like this in public, or whether they're going to discuss it in private. So right now, as I understand it, they don't have the option to go into closed meeting to discuss that kind of personal information. So it's basically, it gives them that option to say, well, listen, if we want to keep this private, we can. Now, and the parent actually can say, no, I don't want to, just talk about it, and that's fine too. But again, it's just giving the board an option. And I think the other way it could matter is sort of posting public agendas for a meeting. They're going to post information. So it would be another way to keep that private, as I understand it.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Follow up? Delegate Simon.
So, Madam Chair, I'll start with one question and see how it goes. So I'll be a compound question. That way I'll get away with the question. So it seems to me that we've got an exception number 4 in the statute already, which is the protection of privacy of individuals in personal matters not related to public business. Maybe that doesn't fit perfectly, but the question I've got, this is the only one I see where, as you said, the statute's permissive. And so we leave it to the public body to make a decision about whether they're going to be in closed session or not. Your new exception actually doesn't leave it to the public body. It actually leaves it to the parents to decide. So it's an a la carte thing, right? So I don't know that there's any other exceptions where the person who's the subject of the conversation gets to decide whether or not the meeting's going to be held in public or in private. Typically, like I said, it's permissive, so a public body can say, I need to do this in closed session, or they can say, we're going to do this open session. But your bill says, well, the public body gets the first crack at deciding whether it's going to be an open or closed session, but ultimately then the family gets to decide. And I think that's adding so if you know of any, I know there's 55 of them, and I'm just sort of scanning it, but are there any other exceptions where we let the subject of the conversation be the one to decide whether it's going to be an open or closed session? I see Megan Ryan shaking her head no, but maybe you see something else. I'll stop talking so you can answer.
Thank you.
I think one of the witnesses we have may be better positioned than me to answer that. But I think, so that objection can be made, or that shall be made in an open meeting. So they make that there, and then that's discussed by the board, and then they make the decision from there.
Madam Chair, I would just note that they make it an open meeting, but it doesn't seem like it's discretionary because the statute says it's unless the parent or guardian of the child objects. So it seems like if once they object, that seems to begin and end the conversation about that. So maybe counsel, I think, maybe wants to assist.
Yeah, sure, please.
Joe Underwood, Senior Attorney with the FOIA Council. We have not a position on this bill to start, but yes, there is no other exception that would allow the recipient to make the decision. And a closed meeting has to happen during an open meeting. So you'd have to have an open meeting to go into a closed meeting. So you can't just have it separately. But there is only, like I said, that current provision seems to be only applied to public schools. And so the homeschool children do not seem to have the same protection. And the files and the records that would be provided would be public records at this point.
Anyone in the audience to speak in favor of this bill?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Ann Hoopstick on behalf of the Home Educators Association of Virginia. This is a simple bill that provides equal privacy protection for all students in Virginia. We support the bill. We're dealing with minor children in these discussions, and so we are just asking for the same benefit of privacy that goes on with public school students. And we do have problems once in a while on public agendas for school board meetings being posted that list information about our families, the students, and this is not done with the public school students. So, that's why one of the considerations we're asking for with this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other folks to speak in favor?
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, Daniel Davies on behalf of the Family Foundation for the reasons that Ms. Hoopstick just mentioned, that we support the bill as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any statements in opposition?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Megan Ryan, Coalition for Open Government. Not totally in opposition, but just to clarify again, to bring up what Delegate Simon said, that yes, that this much of this would be covered by the protection and privacy of individuals in personal matters not related to public business, homeschooling, and homeschooled children not being within that entity's public business. So we feel that protection already exists, and I do want to clarify that this bill would not affect anything having to do with an agenda. If you want to keep that information off of an agenda, that's a different bill. This bill does not do that.
Thank you. Any other statements from the audience in opposition? All right, any questions from committee members?
Madam Chair, I appreciate what the delegate's trying to do, and I think that there may be an avenue to try and add some protection for some of these folks and balance the playing field between public school and private school, because I don't know that this bill's the right way to do it, and it's got some problems, and so I would move that we lay the bill gently on the table.
Second.
All right. Please go to the electronic board. The bill is tabled, a vote of 5-2. Thank you, Delegate Early, for bringing this.
Thank the committee for its time.
Thank you. Yes. We have one bill remaining. Delegate Walker, you have HB 758.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I had two bills going at one time, so I appreciate your patience here. So HB 758 requires all businesses contracting with the Commonwealth to sign a contract stating that they will not engage in a boycott of Israel, Israeli companies, or other companies that do business in Israel during the duration of their contract. The provisions of this bill only applies to contracts more than $100,000 in businesses with more than 10 employees. It also is extended to any such business affiliates and or associate contractors with subcontractors and vendors over $10,000 in value. Simply put, this bill states that the businesses that don't have a right to state contracts and public dollars shouldn't go to support businesses that participate in anti-Semitic movements. Since the October 7th attack on Israel, Israeli-owned companies with significant economic activities in Virginia have been targeted by anti-Semitic activists that blame the companies for the actions of the Israeli government. This bill is a meaningful step to combat anti-Semitism and is a recommendation of the Virginia Commission to combat anti-Semitism. Pardon me. I hope Virginia will join over 30 other states that have adopted similar policies that ban boycotts against Israel related to companies that do contracts with our states. That is the bill before you. There was no appropriations, no impact, any others.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Any comments, questions from members of the committee? Delegate Delaney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think what I'd like to kind of express as a concern with this as a policy matter is conflating anti-Semitism and egregious crimes against humanity with businesses making a political statement that some of us may not agree with, some members of the community may agree with, and our duty in the General Assembly to state whether the state government has an interest in a person or a business's essentially First Amendment rights to make a political statement, and whether or not that should be a factor in their ability to do business in Virginia, especially when their boycott is not necessarily against a declared enemy of this country. And so I guess I have a couple of questions, and if I could start with how many businesses do you feel would be affected if this bill were to become law, and then I'll have a follow-up.
Delegate Walker.
Madam Chair, if I may address the delegate. To be honest with you, I don't know how many as far as impacts at this level right here.
Okay. And Madam Chair, follow-up question. Have you considered the constitutionality of the rights of these businesses to make political statements and still be able to operate and not have that held against them? Because it could apply beyond the scope of this. And I understand that this subject is obviously important to you, and you're bringing this bill forward, but we have to consider the broader spectrum of which this type of policy could apply to allowing companies to take positions on things that are going to have a variety of political temperatures. But does the state have an interest in suppressing that thought, and would that be a violation of that freedom to express one's viewpoints?
Madam Chair, if I may address the delegate.
Yes.
So I'm certainly for free speech. This is not about trying to stop anybody from the free speech movement or whatever the expression may be here. What I think the intent is here that from an economic standpoint, this is going to affect or have impacts, when you have protests. I mean, we've seen this in recent years with other type of issues. I think this is more of sending a message that we want to protect the contractors that are doing work with us there, with the Commonwealth of Virginia, regardless of whatever their ethnic background may be. And so this is more of, we're here to protect all of our contractors, regardless. But this was most recently a target here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and we feel that it's important enough to make a statement that we're not going to tolerate this as far as anybody attempting to do business here, whether it is the Jewish, the Israelis, or any other type of company.
Thank you. Delegate, follow-up? Anyone who'd like to speak in favor of this bill in the audience?
Oh, sure.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, my name is Rob Slotnick. I sit on the board of the Jewish Community Federation of Richmond and chair its Jewish Community Relations Committee. The JCRC, as we are known, is the Jewish community's primary community relations voice and policy advocate. On behalf of the Jewish community, we support this bill in spirit, although it may not be ready for adoption. This bill should focus on action, not on beliefs. In essence, entities that want to do business with Virginia would be free to be as critical of Israel as they want. What they should not be allowed to do, however, is actively discriminate against Israeli citizens or businesses and still be awarded a state contract. It's important to recognize the fact that partnerships in Virginia with Israeli companies have led to a significant economic impact in our Commonwealth. 4 Israeli companies alone with their U.S. headquarters and/or their core operations in Virginia contributed $6.5 billion to our GDP. Most recently, in 2021, over $80 million has been exported to Israel. These firms continue to contribute hundreds of millions of dollars annually to the Commonwealth's economy. This important and mutually beneficial relationship has grown in part because of critical government bodies such as the Virginia Israel Advisory Board, who are champions of these growing economic ties. Virginia has a robust history of trade and working with Israel in research, academics, and many other fields. And we, in the Jewish community, want to preserve that tradition. We look forward to working with various legislators to craft a bill that can be fully supported. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Slotkin. We also will hear anyone who wants to speak in opposition to 758. And we'll have the timer on. If you could please let us know. Is she there? She emailed by 1 second.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I am Nancy Ween. I am also a member of the Richmond Jewish community. As a member of the Richmond Jewish community, I feel that it is my duty, in fact, it is my obligation, a central pillar of Jewish ethical tradition, to speak out against violations of Palestinian human rights. HB 758, if adopted, would violate the First Amendment rights of Virginians who contract with the state to use the time-honored tradition of boycotts to call out Israel for its human rights violations. And this year, at this particular time, when I am in deep mourning myself for the loss of life, as Israel continues to call out, as Israel continues its murderous rampage in Gaza, killing over 25,000 Palestinians, 70% of which are women and children, so many orphans being created. The mere introduction of such legislation again this year would seek to stifle our voices against this tyranny. And this is truly outrageous that they are trying this once again. We've been down this road 3 times in the past several years, and every time, this has come before the General Assembly, and every time it's defeated, which it should be. 2016, 2022, 2023, and here we are again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Vote no. Thank you.
Hello, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Christiana Reeder, and I'm a member of Richmond and a full-time activist with social and environmental justice. I want to call this bill, HB 758, is intended to, and indeed would, suppress free speech, advocacy for civil rights and human rights in Virginia as well as in Israel and Palestine. And to echo again the time-honored tradition of boycotts, let's not forget the Montgomery bus boycotts, which are a major part of the civil rights movement and fighting another ongoing injustice in this country. And I would like to echo the words of Martin Luther King. The ultimate tragedy is not the oppression and cruelty by the bad people, but the silence over that by the good people. This bill would, in essence, silence those very good people. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I believe we have 3 people who have signed up online to speak against the bill. And again, I'll ask you if you will please hold your comments to 2 minutes. And if there's something that's already been said, if you can just say that you go along with that rather than repeating it. So first we have Ms. Zenia Hutchison.
Thank you so much. My name is Zaina Hutchison. After 3 failed attempts over the past years at passing this unconstitutional prohibition of boycott of Israel bill, which we know is encouraged and essentially sponsored by the Israeli regime, it is yet again being brought up for consideration. Not only should it be extremely concerning that our constitutional rights are under attack, but also that our rights are being compromised to attempt to benefit the interests of a foreign government at the expense of Virginians and Palestinians. If asking Virginians to take what amounts to be a loyalty oath to a foreign government isn't bad enough, this foreign regime is currently indiscriminately bombing in the Gaza Strip, using starvation as a weapon of war, displacing millions of Palestinians, and is under investigation for genocide, both at the International Court of Justice and their officials at the International Criminal Court. On any given day, this bill shouldn't even be introduced in the Virginia General Assembly, but to attempt to prevent our First Amendment right to boycott a foreign government that has killed over 25,000 Palestinians and injured over 60,000 in a little over 3 months is just absurd. Attempts to make us all complicit in enabling the genocide and ethnic cleansing of Palestine. I have testified against this bill multiple times and will continue to do so, not just to protect Virginians' First Amendment right to boycott, but also because we will not be intimidated into silence in exposing the Israeli regime's crimes or forced into further complicity, in addition to the billions of tax dollars and weapons we send. To comment on what the previous person said with regards to support to VIA, the Virginia Israel Advisory Board, and the companies they bring in. Some of these companies include Elbit Systems, Israel's largest arms producer, whose weapons have been used extensively over the years to kill and maim Palestinians, including in Israel's current genocide on the Gaza Strip, and many others, including the Israel Aerospace Industries. As a Palestinian born in Jerusalem and raised in Palestine, as a Virginian and as an American, I ask that you vote no and to stop the passage of 18758.
Thank you very
Let's
much.
get foreign entities out of state politics. Thank you.
Mr. Paul Norsey.
Yeah, hi. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Virginia Coalition for Human Rights. And the Virginia Coalition for Human Rights urges this committee and the General Assembly to reject HB 758. This bill would clearly violate free speech guaranteed by the First Amendment of the United States and guaranteed by Article 1, Section 12 of the Constitution of Virginia. There are many reasons this bill should be rejected. As was mentioned, this would basically be a loyalty oath to a foreign government. It's protected free speech. The state legislature should not be dealing with foreign policy. This is bad for business and free enterprise. Contractors should be hired based on the best value to the state, not based on politics. And this bill is indeed intended to suppress advocacy for civil rights and human rights, especially now as an ongoing genocide is unfolding before the world's eyes. We can't suppress people's right to protest genocide. When we say never again, it means never again for everybody. Boycotts are a tradition. This country started with the Boston Tea Party as part of the boycott of British tea from India. And the Supreme Court has ruled that, quote, an economic boycott constitutes a form of constitutionally protected expression akin to traditional means of communication. Therefore, I urge you all to please vote no on HB 758.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Ms. Catherine Akbar.
Hello, my name is Catherine Metras Akbar, and I'm an activist with the Virginia Coalition for Human Rights, a director of Churches for Middle East Peace, and a former U.S. Foreign Service officer speaking in my personal capacity. I'm also a Virginia business owner, and I urge you to defeat this punitive bill. I was still in college when South African apartheid ended, but have you noticed that among my seniors, people who were for business as usual with apartheid South Africa now pretend they opposed it? The sponsor and supporters of this bill smear us with spurious allegations of anti-Semitism, suggesting that people who boycott Israel do so to discriminate against Jews. In fact, people, including many Jews, particularly the younger generation, boycott Israel because Israel discriminates against non-Jews by killing them indiscriminately, restricting their ability to move in their own territory and to leave it, destroying their homes and trees, stealing their land and water, imprisoning and torturing them after sham trials, and denying them a vote on the practices that govern their lives. Israel is an apartheid state according to Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, the UN Special Rapporteur for the Situation of Human Rights in the Palestinian Territory occupied since 1967, Harvard University Law School, the Jewish Israeli Human Rights Organization B'Tselem, and many others. I have lived under the brutal Israeli version of apartheid. My ex-husband was imprisoned after a sham trial and tortured by the Israeli government for his nonviolent political activities, even though the U.S. government later recognized him as faultless and made him a U.S. citizen. I choose not to do business with Israel because I don't do business with apartheid states. Human rights are even more important to me than money. And even if you haven't had the dubious opportunity to live in occupied Palestine and hold a different opinion, members of the Virginia House should be in the business of supporting local businesses, not getting dragged into the world's most controversial foreign policy issue, and mandating Virginia business practices as they relate to doing business with a foreign country. I predict that if you do vote for this bill, someday you will pretend with your children and or grandchildren that you did not.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Delegate Simon?
Madam Chair, speaking to the bill, briefly, I think it's important to say a couple things. One, I hear Mr. Slotkin and share his desire to make sure that we do what we can in this General Assembly to battle anti-Semitism. And to that end, I've worked probably to the chagrin of both sides. I think I've probably upset folks on both sides of this issue, helping to craft a definition of anti-Semitism, which we use in Virginia now that was controversial at the time. I actually proposed hate crimes legislation and a floor substitute, which was rejected by the other side, that would have addressed anti-Semitism and the issue of any kind of ethnic discrimination that's based on ethnicity beyond just religion. And that bill's been reintroduced, and we'll be hearing that soon. And I think it's a very real issue. I know I've seen it and felt it in my own family, in my own community, and something that needs to be tackled. I will also say that our votes on these bills should not be viewed as the wholesale acceptance of the testimony you might have heard for or against. So should I vote against this bill, I wouldn't want anybody to think that that meant I was adopting the position of all the speakers who spoke against it. I have my own reasons for feeling like this bill isn't the right way to approach this. This is a foreign policy issue I don't think the Commonwealth ought to be getting into in its contracting. I don't think this is a tool that we ought to be using to achieve whatever policy somebody may or may not have. So again, I think it's important to state for the record that I think this is an important issue that needs addressing. I think the General Assembly has got a couple of ways to address it. I just don't think this is the right bill to do it. And again, a vote against this bill doesn't mean that I'm adopting the position of some of those folks that also spoke against it. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Delegate Delaney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Delegate Simon put that quite eloquently, and I think just adding to my concern the constitutional issue. You know, we took our oath. Some of us renewed our oath. Some took it for the first time, and upholding the Constitution is paramount to our duties here. And I have serious concerns with the First Amendment violation that this might put the state in jeopardy of. And I have a motion at appropriate time.
That's appropriate time.
Move to lay this bill on the table.
Second.
All right. Can we have members please indicate their preference on the electronic board? Mr. Walker, Delegate Walker, the prohibition from boycotting is tabled, and thank you so much for bringing it forward.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee.
That concludes our business. Is there a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Vote. All in favor?
Aye.
More.
Good night, everyone.